LIVESTREAM. Amanda.
Amandla. Amandla. Viva NUM, viva. Viva National Union of Mine Workers, viva. Viva COSATU, viva. Viva African National Congress, viva. Viva SACP, viva. Amandla. Amandla.
Kudala belqongqotha thambo kudala beliqongqotha kudala belikhangela befuna ukulidla yina nazintsana ke kwathini zikulindile naba bafazi ke kwathini bafuna ukusula inyembezi nangamadoda ke kwathini afuna ukunika umqhayi yina bendintoni nakwathini ungathethi ngamadoda nangamadoda alindele uluvo nangamadoda alindele ukwazi yina kuthi mandithi mthondololo.
Amandla. Long live the National Union of Mine Workers, long live. Forward with the NUM, forward. Program Director, the President of the National Union of Mine Workers, Comrade Joseph Muntiseti, the National Office Bearers of the National Union of Mine Workers, and members of the NEC, and indeed the entire membership of the National Union of Mine Workers. I also extend my greetings to Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe, a former General Secretary of this glorious union. Moshapele matso. Wabanyalwa kakhulu namhlanje anifuni nokuqabela izandla uComrade Kgalema Motlanthe. Hayibo ma comrade. Hayibo. I also extend my greetings to Comrade Bheki Ntshali, Brataiga, the General Secretary of COSATU, and I also extend my greetings to the leadership of the ANC and the SACP and COSATU, who are also here in this Congress. Allow me also, comrades, to extend my greetings to the guests who are here. I see you have a number of international guests. I extend my greetings to them as well. Comrades, it is a real honor for me to address this 17th National Congress of the National Union of Mine Workers, but also to extend real appreciation for the fact that this year the National Union of Mine Workers is celebrating 40 years of existence. The NUM was started in 1982 in Matlosana, in a church building which we used to call Klaksdorp, today it's Matlosana, in a very modest way. On the late afternoon of a Saturday, we gathered to form the National Union of Mine Workers. And I'm proud to see all of you in wonderful colors, gathered as you are from the 11 regions, or is it 10 or 11 regions? 11 regions of South Africa. In 1987, when the NUM was just 5 years old, it embarked on the biggest strike by a single union that this country and indeed this continent has ever seen. The bosses then wanted to destroy this union. They failed to destroy this union. 35 years later and 40 years later, your union is still in existence, still going strong, and for me it is a proud moment to stand here and see that this union that was formed 40 years ago still lives and still leads and still unites the workers in the mining, construction, and various other industries that you've gone into till today. Congratulations to all of you, comrades. Your union was formed to advance the rights of workers whose labor literally built South Africa. And given that your foundation was mining, and mining was the industry on which the fortunes of South Africa were built on. As I look back on the formation of NUM, it comes to me just how many similarities exist between that time when the NUM was formed and today as well. The mining industry, and later your construction industry, and the other industries that you are into now, has been impacted by political currents. Periods of decline followed by the periods of increased productivity, advances in technology, market forces, as well as ever-changing landscape of industrial relations. And yet one thing that has not changed, and it is the potential that is unleashed when workers like yourselves assert themselves, build organizations that are resilient, like the National Union of Mine Workers. It is when workers like yourselves and your unions embrace change, and when they unite to pursue common objectives. The NUM was built on unity. Right from 1982, it was a vehicle through which we sought to unite the mine workers of South Africa. And I'm proud to see that you have not only continued to unite mine workers, you've also broadened out to bring in other workers from other industries. And once again, well done to you, NUM. You continue to be a great inspiration to us as we see you getting stronger and stronger as the National Union of Mine Workers. Now, the mining industry and the construction industry continue to be the lifeblood of the South African economy, just like the veins that carry oxygen-rich blood to the various organs of the body and keep us alive. It is one of our most important sectors. Both these two sectors and accounts for a substantial share, particularly mining, of our export earnings. This is a good time for the mining industry specifically, on the back of high commodity prices. Last year, corporate income tax receipts from mining increased government revenues by close on to 100 billion rand. And that is because of the activities that you are involved in as workers in our mining industry. Because of its centrality to economic growth, government has prioritized structural reforms to improve the business and operating environment for mining, particularly with regards to electricity generation and water use. And similarly, we're also focusing on other industries such as construction, because it is when the construction industry grows that our economy also demonstrates a great deal of growth. In late 2020, we announced the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan to grow our economy and to create jobs. And as part of its implementation, we have been working hard on trade and investment promotion, including generating more investment in the mining sector. The 332 billion rand in investment pledges raised at last week's fourth South African Investment Conference to bring us close to 95% of the target that we set in 2018 of raising 1.2 trillion rand is a clear demonstration that this also is a sector, because a number of commitments were also to commit further capital in the mining industry and in various parts of the country, and also in the Northern Cape, where there hasn't been much investment. The Premier of the Northern Cape called me and said he's proud of the fact that a number of those commitments have put the Northern Cape, the mining industry there, on the investment map. Now, these are investment commitments raised in the middle of a global pandemic and come from various parts of the world, from various countries. And there were up to 40 countries that were represented at the investment conference. Now, these commitments are both to expand as well as to make new commitments to implement projects in mining, automotive, agriculture, agro-processing, manufacturing, renewable energy, construction, particularly in the area of infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, the creative industries, and more. Now, with these new mining investments and infrastructure investment, billions in new and expanded investment will be going into infrastructure, they'll be going into platinum, steel, vanadium, aluminium production, metal fabrication, manufacturing, and a number of other value-added areas, particularly in beneficiation. We have prioritized beneficiation, comrades, as a catalyst for economic growth and job creation, with a particular focus on platinum and its importance to the green economy. We have always seen mining and infrastructure build as two sunrise industries. And it is through this that we are going to see greater growth in our economy as we reconfirm that these are sunrise industries and not sunset industries. The focus on beneficiation doesn't just present immense potential for the creation of new industries. It advances the empowerment of communities, supports small businesses and suppliers in the mining value chain, and opens up new jobs for all workers, particularly in mining, manufacturing, infrastructure build, construction, and all that. These investments do not include the 131 billion rand in financing we hope to mobilize for the Just Transition Partnership that we concluded with a number of partners at the last COP26 conference. This will support our just transition to a low-carbon, climate change resilient economy and society. Now, I'm very impressed, much impressed, I must say, with the position that the National Union of Mine Workers, together with COSATU, that you have taken on the issue of a just transition. I've been reading the book that has been prepared for this conference, and I must say, in that book, you are setting out very clear and progressive positions that we must heed as a government, but also bring to the attention of the various other global players that we interface with. So I applaud you. I applaud you for setting out a very clear and progressive position in the document that you have set out for the conference. Your position on climate change and the just transition being based on the 4 pillars: social dialogue, social protection, the rights of workers, and employment protection and creation, is the best position that I have had, and I applaud you for that, and I wish you strength as you continue to articulate this position. As the negotiations continue on this, because there are going to be lots of negotiations, I would wish that the position of the National Union of Mine Workers should be well articulated, it should be clear, and you must not mince your words, because through this position, you are demonstrating also, comrades, that you are taking into account the interests of the communities that are in mining towns, in coal mining towns. And you are also advocating for the creation of jobs and new jobs as we move on, so that workers can also be trained, be skilled, reskilled, upskilled, so that they are ready for these new industries that are going to come up. But the foundation is going to be your mining industry. So thank you very much. I found it very educational. And once again, the NUM is showing, as it has always shown, that it is a forward-thinking organization. You are able to come up with clever ideas. And it started, by the way, when you started as a union to negotiate with the bosses. When we would go to negotiate with the bosses, either the Chamber of Mines, we always knew that the NUM's position would be always better than the boss's position. And that is what has made you what you are. Keep where you are as a union. Now, comrades, like any other sector of our economy, mining, as well as construction, has been impacted negatively by slow economic growth and rising unemployment, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic has made it worse. Living with COVID-19 pandemic is now a global reality. After a period of relative slowing down, there have been new outbreaks in countries like China and a few other countries. Extreme vigilance and caution is the order of the day, even as numbers in our own country and in other parts of the world go down. Also on the pandemic, inequitable access to life-saving vaccines has rendered vast numbers of people, particularly in developing countries, vulnerable. Even in countries like ours that have ample vaccine supplies and stocks, vaccine hesitancy is a growing problem. We're finding that having reached 43% of people who have been vaccinated fully, many are now reluctant to lift us to the level where we want to be of 70%, where we would now have what we call herd immunity or population immunity. It is a concern to us that having had a very good run up to where we are, about 43%, now we are beginning to slow down, particularly amongst the young people. What this means is that millions of unvaccinated people in public spaces, in schools, and in places of higher learning, and indeed also in workplaces, are vulnerable to severe illnesses, to hospitalization, and even to death from existing variants and variants that may also come in the future. Social movements in support of environmental justice are on the rise. There is renewed pressure on sectors like mining to employ more sustainable practices and to be more accountable to communities in which they operate. There is currently a war in Europe, as we know, that has polarized countries on a scale last witnessed at the height of the Cold War or even the Second World War. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has exposed the fragilities of the current international order. Its economic implications are being felt via shocks on global oil prices, disruptions to the global value chain, and the rising prices on key commodities such as wheat, such as edible oils, and all that. It cannot be discounted that as this conflict continues, the pace of the global economic recovery that was already uneven at best could be set back further. For struggling economies such as ours, the green shoots of recovery that we have been seeing and experiencing over the past year have to be safeguarded against these and other external shocks. From a social and economic perspective, we as South Africa enter this year in a position that is slightly different from the past. And this is thanks to our management of the pandemic. Over the past 2 years, we are now in a position to end the national state of disaster soon and put regulations in place to prevent the possibility of a deadly wave that could come. Many of our people are tired of these lockdowns. Many of our people want to have their freedom back pre-COVID-19. And this is precisely what government is working on. So I can say with certainty, the national state of disaster is going to end so that your lives go back to normal. Now, the extensive social relief program government implemented has had a tangible impact on livelihoods and income protection for workers, for businesses, as well as the unemployed. The presidential employment stimulus that we put in place to support small businesses and various employer incentives have helped to retain a number of existing jobs, much as we lost 2 million jobs during this period of the pandemic. As the old saying goes, all good and well, but what does this all mean for workers? What does the lifting of the national state of disaster mean for the hours, the workplace, conditions and health and safety of mine workers and construction workers? What will the just energy transition mean for the ESCOM worker whose plant has reached the end of life and will be repurposed using possibly cleaner technologies, or for the coal miner or even the mine owner whose livelihoods depend on extracting coal from the ground? Will the commodities boom translate into greater opportunity and improvement of workers' conditions of service? These are just some of the issues this Congress will need to grapple with. And already, as I look at the Secretariat report and the various other parts of the reports, I see that you are already grappling with weighty matters that impact on the lives of our people and on the economy of our country. As much as the fortunes of mining continue to ebb and flow, so too has been worker conditions of service. Following a long-term trend of improvement in safety, last year saw the second straight regression since 2020, which is worrying. Many retired mine workers still face uphill battles to get what they are owed and what they are supposed to get. Billions and billions of rands is still in various funds, unclaimed and not having reached those mine workers. This, for me, continues to be a matter of real concern, because when the NUM started fighting for the rights of workers and started fighting for safety on the mines, started fighting for the setting up of funds, be they provident funds or health and safety other funds, it meant it was aiming for those monies to be in the pockets of mine workers so that they can sustain their families. Now, the number of unclaimed retirement benefits owed to ex-mine workers remains high. One of the reasons is that employers continue to fail to contact or to inform workers that they are owed these benefits. And I still don't understand how a mining industry, as large as we have had in our country, fails to trace those workers to make sure that they get their benefits. The NUM must engage in this struggle to make sure that employers do trace those workers and make sure that they get their money. Now, though the mining sector has not been spared the effects of the unemployment crisis, there's been welcome news in the latest quarterly labor force survey that mining was one of the 6 industries in which jobs were added in the 4th quarter. Now, we want to see more and more jobs being added, yes, in the mining sector as well as in the construction sector. Wages of mine workers remain an issue of contention, and we have seen recent tensions between unions, your union particularly, and mine owners, with the recent disputes that are going on and the recent strikes. And we just will say those disputes must be resolved, because in the end, we want a mining industry that continues to operate, and that mine workers should not end up being the losers in all this. At such junctures, at times, both opportunity and crisis, we are called upon indeed to go back to basics. And that is why I like your slogan for your conference about going back to basics. And if there ever was a time for our unions to go back to basics and to look at how our unions can be strengthened once again, particularly unions in the COSATU family, we must reinvigorate and breathe new life into the progressive and revolutionary programs of action that the National Union of Mine Workers has driven since it was founded, that unions in COSATU have driven since COSATU was also founded. This does not only apply to driving safety on our mines or in construction sites, but fighting for better work conditions. NUM attained its stature because of its progressive programs to empower workers. NUM is held, comrades, in high regard today because of the commitment to making the voices of workers heard in policy making, in relations with business, in society, and in the project for transforming our economy. Our theme as a government for this year is Leave No One Behind. As we forge ahead implementing our economic reconstruction and recovery plan, I want to call on NUM to reassert itself in this space. There was a time when NUM was the country's fastest growing union. But let me correct myself. The NUM, right from at inception, was the fastest growing union in the world. Mark my words, in the world. There was no union that was growing as fast as the National Union of Mine Workers. And we would like to see the NUM continuing to grow. Comrades, many workers in our country remain unorganized. Many workers are still outside unions. And I would like to see the fervor, the commitment that your union had right at the beginning coming back. And that for me is going back to basics. Workers need to be organized in unions because it is then that the work world is well organized, it's well regulated, and unions speak with a very clear and loud voice on behalf of workers. Now, and there was a time when the NUM was the largest COSATU affiliate. Now, the NUM has lost that stature and that standing, but there are still a number of mine workers, construction workers, and some of your allied industry, energy workers, who are still not organized. And the question I would ask is, why is that so? Why does the NUM leave other workers unorganized and not in the National Union of Mine Workers? We used to say every mine worker must be a member of the National Union of Mine Workers, and that is why the NUM grew so fast. Now more than ever, we need the muscle and the weighty backing of the NUM to unite workers around a common goal of advancing the interests of workers. So I call on you to pick up the spear and reclaim your position as the most active union engaged in mobilizing and organizing workers, but also in driving the leadership of the alliance. I have called for a new consensus between government, business, labor, and civil society to resolve our country's challenges, and that this should be done as quickly as possible. I call on the NUM to engage with and be part of this process. It is only through social compacting that we can achieve our common goals, and the reality is to achieve them and to make sure that that compact is durable. In forging a new consensus to eradicate poverty, inequality, and unemployment, we want also to develop mining, construction, and infrastructure along a new trajectory. We are looking at expanding new frontiers for mining in many parts of our country as we pursue a path of ensuring that we embrace this new transition. Unions such as yours should be in the forefront leading this whole process. Now, if we focus on ensuring that indeed workers are brought into our unions. And I also speak to COSATU itself. Many workers in various industries remain unorganized. And COSATU must also ask itself a question. What is it that makes us not to bring many more workers into the fold of the unions in COSATU? And this, comrades, is an important issue that I would like COSATU, as well as yourselves, to talk about and to engage with. Taking forward the workers' struggle depends on a strong and a united alliance to ensure that COSATU remains strong, but also the alliance, which includes your movement, the African National Congress. Because the ANC itself has to reclaim its stature as the leader of society. And this it can do through the strength that you give to the African National Congress. This it can do through the mobilization that you generate as a union, as COSATU. Now, the National Union of Mine Workers played a very important role in the local government elections. And I must applaud the NUM for having been one of those unions that really contributed to the local government elections where you mobilized in many parts of the country. So we say thank you very much for all the mobilization that you got involved in. But as you do that, yes, we encourage you to get involved as ordinary members of the Alliance, as ordinary members of the African National Congress, so that the ANC can move with greater determination to renew itself. Now, as unions, you are always the most organized entities that we've got in our alliance. And we want you to bring to bear that culture, the culture of being well organized, the culture of standing against corruption, the culture of standing against maladministration, the culture of standing against leadership tussles, factionalism, internal strife, and scandals, and all that. Now we want you to bring that culture to your organization, the African National Congress, which you have always supported, as I heard a number of comrades saying over there. So comrades, we rely on the National Union of Mine Workers, and indeed, we rely on COSATU as well, to strengthen the African National Congress, to make the African National Congress the leader of society once again, but also not to be shy when you see that the African National Congress is going wrong, not to hold back, to be upfront, yes, to be critical, and to speak truth to power as well. That is your role as the National Union of Mine Workers. And we want you to take up that role with good effect. We have work to do, and we have to work urgently for renewal to succeed and for us to regain legitimacy. Yes, it is you who must tell the ANC to go back to basics, as you are now going back to basics. And that is why I like your slogan of going back to basics. This includes rebuilding structures at community level, returning to activism in our communities, and mobilizing people against social ills such as gender-based violence and such as environmental degradation. Now, for me, it is pleasing to see 40 years later that the structure of the membership of the NUM has changed. We've got women in your midst as members who work underground, and we want to see more and more of these women in your structures as leaders, standing up and speaking. Now, as I was listening here, it was only men who were speaking. Only men. And I asked myself, how? Is it the chairperson who is not recognizing the women, or is it the women holding back? And if it's the women holding back, Keri, leska bathaba banna ba. Akisi le bathaba e. You must stand up and claim your place as fully fledged members of the National Union of Mine Workers. Bukare waitsi, we can go back to 1982. Ngabe le lona le le teng, ne re tla ba re le batho ba betere le rona. But I applaud you, and I also applaud you as the NUM for having set up a youth structure. Because in the end, your union belongs to the youth. Your union belongs to the future, and I'm delighted to see such great participation of many of you. Now, back to basics should also mean convening and holding successful and violence-free and corruption-free conferences. Now, you are amongst the few who are holding your conference so early. This is the year of conferences. Our movement broadly, in the Congress movement, we will be holding many conferences. COSATU is going to conference, many unions are going to conference, South African Communist Party is going to conference, and at the end of the year, the ANC itself is going to conference. Now, I am hoping that all these conferences will go on successfully, violence-free, corruption-free, so that we elect our leaders and the type of leaders who are going to take our organizations forward. That is what we need to do. And it is also means that we must put our organizations first, not ourselves as individuals. Not ourselves. We must put our movements, our organizations forward first. They must be first, and they must be our primary preoccupation. What is in the interest of our organizations, not what is in the interest of a particular individual. That should not be the preoccupation. So, and if, for instance, and we're now developing a very, very progressive culture, that if, for instance, leaders are found to have been involved in malfeasance, have been charged, found guilty, the step-aside culture and the step-aside policy must apply. Whether it's in the ANC, whether it's in your unions, whether it's in COSATU, wherever it is, we must become a progressive Congress movement that upholds good values, progressive and revolutionary values. And that is when, comrades, our national democratic revolution will really succeed. For renewal to be achieved, we must commit to ongoing study and learning around the aims and objectives of our movement. This is what going back to basics is all about. So, comrades, I'm delighted to have been given this opportunity to come and address you. Much as you doubted whether I should address you now or in the evening, I'm glad you gave me time to do so now. When I leave here, I'm going to see Comrade James Motlatsi, who has not been well, your very first president. And after that, I've got other matters, as one comrade said there, matters of state that I have got to attend to. Would I have loved to stay here with you all day? The answer is yes. This is my union. This is where I feel at home. This is my home. So this is where I would have wanted to be. So, comrades, I wish to congratulate you for holding this 17th National Conference, but more importantly, I congratulate you for having kept this union alive for 40 years. And I wish you another 40 years. I may not be around for those 40 years, but I certainly will come every year to celebrate the success and the continued existence of the National Union of Mine Workers. Forward with the NUM, forward. Forward with the NUM, forward. Amandla. Ngiyabonga.
Inameva iyashaba sizozabalaza sizozabalaza.
Sibule siyofile ntilongweni Ramaphosa. Siyaya sibule siyofile ntilongweni Ramaphosa siyofile ntilongweni Ramaphosa. Thank you very much, comrades. Thank you. Chona. Chona. Anyone who knows Chona, we have his driver's license here. Chona. Chona. That's your pestil papier, so. Comrades, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to allow the first citizen to speak, especially the comrades who withdrawn the motion. Rustenburg, jullie het nou mooi gewerkt, baie dankie hoor. Manje ke, adibuele ngabo cho. leng khasa ka kudu ka gore le hlompha baeng ke bere haka Freistata. Comrades, the list is here. We have been talking amongst ourselves here, especially the Chief of Administration and the head of the Constitution. There are two things that we want to highlight to you as a Congress. Clause number 14.6. It has got 6 items. And when you look at Annex 3 of the Constitution, it deals with discipline. Even the appeal itself, it deals with discipline of a member, elected official, and the likes. We are advised here that we do a true prompt approach. This Congress must then applaud itself to say it has met a challenge that seeks to deal with a situation that keeps the union even after Congress. The last point of the functions of the Congress, if you read that Constitution correct, it talks about assessing the progress. It talks about approving. The last point, it talks about approving constitutional amendments. It approves because if NUM wants to amend the Constitution, it calls for a special Congress, which we are from a special Congress in Durban. We are not disputing the fact that 14.1 under purpose, yes, this Congress is a supreme body of the union. From there, it gives functionaries of the supreme body, but it does not deal with the situation that we are facing here today. Therefore, we are advised to have a team. The team that must then be formed here in the Congress, the same team report in the Congress, and if the Congress adopt the results of that particular team, we find a way of putting that particular proposal in the proposals or approvals, the resolutions that we had in Durban for this Congress to approve. This is the advice we are given. And the comrades, don't forget that the same hall, the pulpit was there. We were dealing with the issue of notice the previous year, July. We were still here, and we called all former leaders, we called COSATU and everybody. Therefore, all these regions which were to speak on this issue of appeals, I'm saying appeals because when I leave the stage, the acting general secretary, all what he's going to do is to only tell you how many of those we received or he received on our behalf. From that angle, we then allow a space from your engagement of that particular team that must deal with this kind of issues. Because in the Constitution, I repeat, they are not provided, including in Annex 3. Those of you who read the Constitution, the appeal that it is dealt with here, it is an appeal after a disciplinary hearing. Comrade Acting General Secretary, you are on the podium. We are proceeding with this issue of appeals. Make the Congress aware. How many did you receive and what are their content?
Amandla. Matla. Yeah, comrades, there is an appeal for Eastern Cape conference. I will not deal deeply on it because we are not dealing with the merits. There is also an appeal about the disbandment. The appeal of Eastern Cape is also about disbandment of Eastern Cape. The appeal of Matlosana is about the disbandment of the regional office bearers. The third one is a dispute of delegation in Free State, where there are 7 branches that are disputing delegation in Free State. So I've been requested to read the dispute that were, or the appeals that were sent to head office, and then I'm precisely reading, and I'm saying it's 3. It's 1 for Eastern Cape, 1 for Matlosana, both 2 are disbandment. The one for Free State is a different thing, where branches are disputing their delegation. So maybe safe to say if they are saying their delegations were changed, not by them, as the branches.